The Department of Energy is basically the successor of the Manhattan, excuse me, of the Manhattan Project. Many people have seen the movie Oppenheimer last year, which described the Manhattan Project, by which the U.S. in World War II constructed the world's first nuclear, actually two atomic bombs, and the Department of Energy succeeded the Manhattan Project in the nuclear weapons work. So because of that, it is distinctive in all the hundreds of federal agencies in several ways, one of which being it's self-regulating for both nuclear safety and worker safety. So in my job in the Department of Energy, I was hired to be essentially a combination nuclear safety engineer and worker safety engineer to conduct internal oversight of the Department of Energy's worker and public health and safety programs.
So let me just stop right there for a second. So you're saying that the Department of Energy doesn't have any oversight; it's internal oversight only.
That's correct. Again, singular. Of all the hundreds of federal agencies, there is only one that, excuse me, going to OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. When that law was passed in 1970, federal agencies were given the opportunity to waive OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration oversight, and impose it on themselves. The Department of Energy is the single federal agency that did that. So the OSHA does not have jurisdiction over the Department of Energy's facilities.
Is
Neither
that
does
kind of
the.
that's I mean, that's pretty strange, right?
It's unique in all the federal agencies, but again, it results from the nuclear weapons mission. Congress didn't want any other agency or the Department of Energy to be able to interfere with the nuclear weapons mission of the Department of Energy. And we paid a high price as a society for that self-regulation, and my story is quite involved with that. The Department of Energy also claimed to be self-regulating for environmental safety for decades. It would say that the Environmental Protection Administration had no jurisdiction over the Department of Energy sites. Now, eventually, as a result of a number of lawsuits about all the environmental disasters that the Department of Energy did constructing these nuclear weapons, it relinquished its claim to be self-regulating for environment. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is another, if you follow their genealogy, it's another product of the Manhattan Project. And at one time, with the Atomic Energy Commission, the Atomic Energy Commission was both the regulator of nuclear power and the promoter of nuclear power. And kind of similar to what the FAA is, the Federal Aviation Administration is. If you look at its charter, it both promotes air travel and regulates air travel. Kind of a conflict, can be a
Yeah,
conflict.
right.
So
So also let's just back up for 1 second. So the Department of Energy, when we think of energy, we think of energy, not nuclear weapons. So how
right.
is it? So, but the Department of Energy develops nuclear. Kind
It's
of
a
explain that
misnomer. The
part.
Department of Energy, in part, in much larger part, should be the Department of Nuclear Weapons. That's correct. But it also has missions involving energy. That's true. But if
So,
you look
so wait,
at the
wait,
budget,
wait, wait. So you're saying the Department of Energy should be renamed to the Department of Nuclear Weapons?
well, actually, within the Department of Energy, there is a semi-autonomous entity called the National Nuclear Security Administration, which is more now involved with the nuclear weapons work. But that is within the Department of Energy. But if you look at the Department of Energy's budget, the largest part is dealing with nuclear weapons, and the
So it's
second
not the
largest
Department
part.
of Defense that does the nuclear weapons, it's the Department of Energy.
Well, there's a relationship. The Department of Defense the Department of Energy is the custodian of America's nuclear stockpile. It is also the designer of nuclear weapons. It is the tester of nuclear weapons. The Department of Defense would be more the user of nuclear weapons.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes, it
I
is.
didn't know this about the Department of Energy. I don't know if people, I mean, maybe I was just living under a rock. I mean, do you think most people know that?
No,
Okay, so that gives a whole different meaning for Department of Energy right now. Now we're dealing with
right. But
nuclear weapons here.
it
Okay.
does deal with energy. I don't want to say
Of
the Department
course.
of Energy does not deal with energy. It does, but primarily it's dealing with nuclear weapons.
Okay. All right. So this is serious.
Yes, very serious.
And okay, so
It's
you're now
also,
working for
if you will, the lead federal agency for securing nuclear weapons material around the world. So when you read about CIA trying to secure nuclear weapons material, ultimately they're working for the Department of Energy and trying to do that.
interesting. You know, and what makes this kind of interesting is that at one point I want to say, and I'm just kind of recalling in my mind, that maybe last year or something, Department of Energy came out, and it came from the Department of Energy where they said, I want to say it was like the lab leak theory or something, or they kind of said they made a statement, and it was, and everybody scratched their head and thought, why is the Department of Energy, out of all the departments, why is the Department of Energy the one that is making
Right.
this statement of they had done some research into something that had to do with like weapon, it was more of a defense situation. And now this is kind of making sense.
Right.
If they're really more of an arm of the Department of Defense, they're really just, I mean, this is a nuclear weapons agency, then it makes sense that they'd be digging into
Yes.
some of this. Okay.
Well,
It
when
makes
I
a little bit more sense.
to Kim, so this was when I first joined the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy also runs the national labs, so it is the single
Ah,
biggest funder of science in America. Okay, it
okay.
has it a lot of the things that make this complex 8 billion crew member world work. The Department of Energy has a mission: nuclear weapons, energy in all its forms, the biggest environmental cleanup program in history. That's all within the Department of Energy. So a lot of the things that and big science. I mentioned the biggest funder of science. So to make to the Human Genome Project, when we mapped the human genome, the Department of Energy paid for half of that. Why? Because of nuclear weapons and radiation affect chromosomes.
Huh.
So therefore, they had an interest in DNA and chromosomes and radiation damage. So they funded half the genome project. It's
I
everywhere.
so okay, so now when we meet people who work for the Department of Energy, we're not gonna think they just do boring. Now it's like, "Whoa, raise
No,
an eyebrow. What is it you do there at the Department of Energy?"
yeah, a lot of the work
Interesting.
is unclassified, but some of it is classified. Yes.
Wow, okay. Okay, so you're there working at the Department of Energy, so now we'll get back to, now that we understand the Department of Energy a little bit better. So you've gone from the nuclear navy to the private sector, now you're working for the Department of Energy, and what was the problem that you saw?
Well, I had worked in the nuclear navy at shipyards, and I worked at commercial nuclear power plants. So I was exposed to both worker safety and radiation safety practices there. And I walked into the Department of Energy, and I'm like walking around saying, "What? W2 WTF? What? Where have you people not been for the last how many years with respect to worker safety programs and radiation control programs and environmental control programs?" And essentially, the Department of Energy had used the nuclear weapons mission, which involved classification, to cover up a lot of misdeeds in terms of worker safety, in terms of radiation safety, in terms of environmental programs. It was basically make the nuclear weapons, make the contractors make the nuclear weapons rich, and don't rock any boats. We're doing this for America.
So
So
they just were skirting around safety issues
yes,
and covering it up.
yes,
And did you feel like it was deliberate, or
yes.
just, or was it just
It was
incompetence?
a combination of if you work for the Department of Energy, such as me, because you would have nuclear in your job description, you would be a grade and a half above everybody else in the federal government for an equivalent job. So you might think DOE was getting the best and the brightest, maybe, but you're also getting people who would say, "I'll take the money and run because I can't make this kind of money elsewhere." And that was the case for the contractors. The Department of Energy, another singular thing about the Department of Energy is it is so dependent upon contractors. So the Department of Energy owns the facilities, but then it will have contracts with big corporations to operate them. So the Department of Energy workforce is about 125,000 people, but it's kind of like an iceberg in that only about 10% of those 125 are actual federal agency employees of the Department of Energy. The rest work for contractors. That's another singular thing about the Department of Energy. Is the acronym, another acronym, is GOCO. GOCO stands for Government-Owned Contractor Operated, and no other agency has a degree of dependence upon GOCO as the Department of Energy. Another singular thing about it. And again, it
So
comes from the nuclear weapons mission.
what facilities are you talking about that are, so these are government-owned facilities
Right.
run by contractors. What
Yes.
types of facilities?
Well, all the national labs. I mentioned those. All the national labs will be owned by the Department of Energy, but run by contractors. Uh, here in Oak Ridge, we have the gaseous diffusion plants. We have the Y-12 nuclear bomb plant, Savannah River, Richland, Washington. I'm giving you the names that most of your audience will not recognize. Where the Department of Energy works is typically the biggest single source of employment in that area. A lot of them are in kind of rural areas. which is another reason don't rock boats, because that's the source of fresh green cash to the local economy.
Right. So you're seeing that, and I would imagine if all of these facilities are run by contractors, I would imagine they're different contractors, so there would be different. I mean, it wouldn't be uniform.
Yes, there's some distinctions, right? That's correct. But
So then
there's
you're
still the Department
seeing,
of Energy would have some overarching rules and regulations that all the contractors were supposedly would adhere to, but then the
yeah.
contractors would have their own programs to implement them. So there's a kind of a hand in glove thing, or a flow down, if you will.
Right, and then but you were saying that these safety measures were just not being they weren't, they were skirting them because it would be too much, it was
More expense,
cumbersome,
right?
more expense,
Hmm.
and they wanted to cut costs, they wanted to save money.
Right.
Okay, so you see this and I mean, how serious was it just minor? Was it major safety concerns? I mean, at what level, like on a scale of 1 to 10,
Well, a
would you
lot
say
of,
these safety
these are
concerns were?
industrial facilities, so there could be a lot of things: electrical safety, pressure vessel safety, um, fall protection safety. A lot of the OSHA type, kind of things that
Right.
would be anywhere in the world. But then also touching upon some of the missions with Department of Energy would be more radiation safety. Well, making nuclear weapons, you're dealing with a lot of toxic substances, not only the bomb material, but also the other chemicals and substances that make the bombs work. Yes, there's a lot of toxic materials involved in making these things.
And the people that were working there at this time, did they believe that they were safe and that they were adhering to all of these various safety measures that they needed to be adhering to?
Um, s- Most of the workers at the floor were told this stuff is very safe. Don't worry about it. Everything's cool. The safety professionals, as people like myself, you face the dilemma. If you rock boats, you're going to be fired. You're going to be squashed. You're going to be squelched. It won't make any difference. Why bother? Um, so there was, and also on the flip side, you're not going to make this kind of money elsewhere. Okay, and you got a family to raise, and you're not getting rich being a safety professional, Department of Energy, but you're being paid more than you would in an equivalent job on the outside.
Really?
And
Okay, so they're
also,
paying higher
there's also
amounts.
another piece of it is security clearances. I have a security clearance. Security clearance can be removed with very little due process, and then you're unemployed. And if you ever lose a security clearance, you're unemployed and unemployable in the nuclear field. So there's don't rock boats.
Okay.
A lot of things do not rock boats. Everything's cool. You do your job, or you know. And again, I want to be fair. The safety professionals I dealt with, they did not want people to get hurt, but they didn't not want people to get hurt enough to rock boats, if I'm making the
Got it.
distinction.
Yeah. So they just turned a blind eye because because people naturally are gonna protect their own
Right.
livelihood,
Yes.
their situation,
Yeah.
and they just decided not to say anything.
And there's
Why did
also
you
there's a more sinister part of it. Well, we'll get into the legal ethics and the lawyers in the Department of Energy and how they would be the power behind the throne to keep all this going. Yes.
Well, once you get right, once you get I mean, if you're the guy that sees it and maybe you don't wanna say anything, but then once you start saying something, this kinda goes up the chain, and eventually there's somebody that could actually do something about it and who chooses not to, and maybe that is more sinister. And maybe we can get
Right.
into that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you decided to say something
Right.
at risk to yourself. I mean, at this point when you decide to blow the whistle the first time around, you felt these risks, like you could get fired, you would have no livelihood.
Well, again, yeah, I'm a bit different, and we all come to this world, and it's a lot of things that are different now than say for our grandparents or great grandparents, and the way we're interacting. Look at the way we're interacting here, Kim. All right, so my first full-time job as an engineer was too, I described. I was a engineering division officer on a nuclear ballistic missile submarine, which is the ultimate terror machine, designed to kill 20 million people. Okay, I was willing to play in a role in the deaths of 20 million people if so ordered. And then on the flip side, I go and say, oh, and I'm a good Christian. How can I reconcile this, right? Um, so I justified my service on the nuclear submarines, thinking, well, we're trying to buy time for this world to try to resolve its problems more peaceably. That this Cold War is, and I was in the nuclear navy in the late 70s, early 80s during the Iran crisis, the height of the Cold War. Um, Trying to this world to try to make its nations resolve their problems more peaceably. Okay, trying to buy time at enormous expense and cost. So I joined the Department of Energy. That sounds nice, doesn't it, Kim? I'm a really great guy. However, I'm not a BS artist, and I can say, Joe, people salute you, call you sir. It's a fascinating job. These nuclear submarines, outside of a spaceship, the most awesome piece of technology ever devised and put into practice. And I'm an engineer, a young guy out there doing it. Okay, amazing. I would keep walking around the submarine saying, "It's awesome. It's awful. It's awesome. It's awful." Both, right? And they're
Yeah,
still,
yeah,
and they are. They're both. Okay.
right.
All right. So I joined the Department of Energy, and I say, Joe, this is kind of a sinecure. You know what it's like to work hard. You were in the Navy working, hundreds of hours a week, going out to sea 7 months a year, and this is basically a sinecure. And you married, you started your family. Just look the other way. You have your nice house and car, but then admit you're a bullshit artist. All this nice talk about save the world, this and that. No, it was always Joe for Joe. Come on, Joe, be honest. And I said, and more than that, I'm a licensed professional engineer. And as such, I have a positive duty to blow whistles when necessary in my professional duty to protect others. Are you going to follow the law or not, Joe? And you know what, Joe? You made a lot of money, okay? You can stand up to these people, right? The wolf's kind of far from the door, okay? Do your duty, and let's see how it plays out. And it's the Department of Energy with nuclear weapons. It's not the deep fat fry at the Burger King. This is big stuff, and you're up. And here we are 30 years later. I've started pointing my finger at my boss. Now I'm pointing it at President Biden. And I'm still employed, still have a high security clearance, still married. I even get senior gold medals in senior Olympics. Okay? 3 adult children, all doing fine. I'm having a nice life, Kim. Don't worry about me. Worry about you and yours. This is important. Okay.
So you are still employed. I mean, this is the good thing. You have gone through this saga 8 times. Is there 8 times that
Yeah.
you've been a whistleblower? And
In 8
wha
separate decisions at the Merits Protection Board, I won in whistleblower or prevailed. I guess that's more technically accurate in whistleblower litigation, which is a record by a long shot. So I can fairly say I am the GOAT, greatest of all time of career federal agency whistleblowers. I don't say I think I am, but I'm saying this is the GOAT. If another concerned federal employee is going to say, should I blow whistles? My honest answer is, can you live with yourself looking the other way? Really?
yeah.
It's a very cruel jungle. You're going to pay a high cost, and you may not make any difference. And the lawyers will try to destroy you, and they'll do it in the name of legal ethics, no matter what the stakes might be to others' well-being.